It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts Alan Saunders and Zachary Smith.
And Chris Carter.
Woo!
It happened. We've been teasing it. I mentioned yesterday, are we going to continue to tease it, or is Chris actually going to be here?
Just let it be known that when I make a promise, I will eventually deliver. This may take some time.
Chris, what's going on? Great to have you on here. I think most people probably familiar with your work at this point, but real quick, just drop it on them.
Just drop it on it. As you guys know, I write for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, covering all things Pitt sports there. You can find that at post-gazette.com. I also host the North Shore Drive podcast for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and the Locked On Steelers podcast Monday through Friday for the Locked On Podcast Network. I also do work for Channel 11, and then I appear on 93.7 The Fan, and I could keep going with all the things that I do because this is now on the list, boys, but I'm excited.
Locked On Steelers once a week, Alan Saunders on Locked On.
Yes, he is.
Our faces appear next to each other quite often now at this point. It's pretty good. I love talking football with Chris. I'm excited to have him here on our show, get his opinions about a couple things. Smitty, what do we got?
Well, Desmond King becoming official today. We knew that was going to be the case yesterday. If you missed the show, talking with Sean Bajani about that, as well as the other transaction.
Too, I hope that everybody enjoyed that. If they did, we could do more of that kind of thing. But that was awesome having Sean in. We got some serious insight I don't think anybody else had about why Desmond King is not a Houston Texan anymore.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So that becoming official, couple practice squad additions as well. But Chris, we didn't get your thoughts on here regarding Desmond King. So what are your thoughts on the addition and how he kind of fits into this defense?
You know, I don't see him as like a world breaker. Like there's people that are like, oh, this guy, the Steelers just get amping up for the Super Bowl. Like I'm not saying all that, but I will say, like, I think he's a good role player. I think that he will be in the slot. I think that him and Shannon Sullivan are a good mix of guys that I think both might even be upgrades from Arthur Marlette last year. I think Desmond King definitely is. King will bring the ability to defend the run. He will be physical. He's stocky. He'll also be a good communicator. I watched like 3 different games of tape just to kind of just get a sense of who he has been. Because I remember when he was giving Pitt problems when he played for Iowa. I think he had like a big return for them to help beat Pitt many years ago. And then of course he gave the Steelers problems when he was a returner for the Chargers in 2018. So he's been an exciting athlete, but I wanted to see how he is. And he still looks like he's a guy, like he doesn't have the full speed anymore that he used to have, but he definitely is still smart. He knows how to play, and like he's kind of like trying to coach others on the field. Like I'm seeing plays where, as motions are happening, he's the one trying to communicate, to the guys in the Texans. Be like, hey, no, you're in the wrong spot. Get over there. And so that's what I think the Steelers really want out of their secondary, guys who know how to be in the right spots and know how to work with their teammates. Because you look at the starters they're going to have in the secondary. Patrick Peterson, no, you don't need to explain how he's been in the NFL forever. He knows the deal. Levi Wallace knows the deal, been with the Steelers, knows their system, and played well in their system last year. Minkah Fitzpatrick, DeMonte KZ, all those guys, they fit into this very well, and they're veterans who are well-oiled and true professionals. I think Desmond King fits along that line, and now that it's going to continue to allow Terrell Austin, defensive coordinator, to continue to drop concepts that I think disguise more of what the secondary does, and with sharper guys and veterans who knows how to play into those schemes, they can better disguise what they're doing to confuse quarterbacks. So I just think he fits into that scheme even beyond his personal skill level.
I think so the Desmond King game against Pitt, was that the game that was in Pittsburgh, or was that the game that was in Iowa?
I want to say it was in Iowa. I want to say it was. I can't.
That would have been like 15, maybe.
I want to say, because it was before I was covering Pitt. I know that much. Let me try to remember the Desmond King, Pitt, Iowa. Let's see.
Was it a return touchdown? Is that what he did?
I was pretty sure it was like a kick or a punt return that he had.
So I remember that game. It must have been the game in Iowa. That was 15, because he barely played in that game in Iowa City in 15, which is I
want to say, 2015, I think is when it was.
2015. Okay. 2014 game at Acrisure Stadium, Heinz Field then always stands out to me because my very good friend who was a huge Pitt fan was getting married that day. We went up to Mount Washington to take pictures. We go up to Mount Washington, like on the overlook. We're taking pictures as you can like hear Pitt losing the game in the background of his wedding. Like every time he looks at his wedding pictures now, there's like over his shoulder is Pitt losing to Iowa right there as it's happening. Huge Pitt fan. Love that for him. Desmond King, I'm sure he's very excited to have him on the team now. Shout out my buddy Tyler. I think he's great. I think it's a
Desmond King had 2 interceptions in that game.
There you
I'm
go.
looking at the box score right now.
Okay,
Yeah.
so maybe it is.
Look,
Maybe
it wasn't a return touchdown. I think it was just the interception.
That was the one in Pittsburgh. Oh, that's so great because I was just laughing at him as he's like, like you're getting your wedding day. Photographers always like stand here, hold it, put your hand here, do the and all throughout this, it's just like you can just hear the sounds of losing from across the way.
Yeah.
Another pitting. Yep, quite fitting. Here's the thing about Desmond King that I think to me is a bigger deal than Desmond King. There seems to be a continued awareness of the team's weaknesses in a way that I'm not sure we've always seen in the past. Do you remember like there were years where it'd be like it would go into the draft, they're like, oh, the Steelers really need a linebacker, and then they didn't kind of get a linebacker, and then they kind of had just threw somebody in there, and it's like week 1, it's like, hey, they still need a linebacker. What like ever happened to that? It just seems like there is a different level of constant desire to improve this team. Chris, are you feeling that?
I am feeling that a little bit. I feel like we got to be fair to Kevin Colbert because he did a lot of ambitious things over his career. I think what a lot of people remember is the last few years he was in Pittsburgh, and we kind of just get, we remember the most familiar things. But like, you got to remember, he had a franchise quarterback that they were paying big money ever since 2007. So that when you have a quarterback that you're paying that much, you see it limits teams. I mean, it's why it's so amazing what the Chiefs are doing right now because they're paying Patrick Mahomes what they're paying him, and he's still carrying the team, even with that's not as deep of a team as they were when he was on his rookie deal. And that's why I think it's really impressive that the Chiefs are still playing at such a high level because of Patrick Mahomes, and it goes to his greatness. Whereas with the Steelers, they were able to make investments, but there's only so many investments that you can make. And especially when you look at those 2010 Steelers, that team was like, you can only be one thing. You can either be really balanced or really top heavy if you're paying for a franchise quarterback. And they were top heavy. They were paying Antonio Brown big money. They were paying Marquise Pouncey, David DeCastro, Le'Veon Bell. They were paying all sorts of guys, and then a couple guys on defense as well. So when you have all these guys at the top, those guys in the second and third string, they're going to be guys that aren't as valuable because you can't pay as much to those positions. And I think that's where Kevin Colbert just didn't have the ammunition to go get guys like the way that we're seeing Omar Khan get now. And maybe in 4 or 5 years, we'll be seeing the Steelers go through it again if Kenny Pickett plays really well, earns a big contract, and this whole thing starts over again. But right now, certainly, you got to give Omar Khan credit. He is aggressive. He goes and gets who he sees. Same thing for Andy Weidl. And I'd say Mike Tomlin's probably part of this as well. I think that the Steelers are embracing this new window of not having to pay for a big name quarterback. It's allowed them to invest in paying 2 edge rushers big money to be the top guys on the defense, as well as a big safety, and as well as other guys like Cam Hayward who they can keep around. I think it's a good sign for how they're going to operate over the next 3-4 years.
I think so too. I want to talk about Omar and the job he's done. I wrote about it today at SteelersNow.com about the differences between him and Kevin Colbert. The way he approaches the position, to me, I think is very different when you're talking about a guy whose background was in contracts and in salary cap compared to someone whose background was in scouting. And I think one of the things that you see that's different about Omar for me is an increased awareness and understanding how to take advantage of what the rest of the league is doing. I thought Kevin Colbert was an outstanding scout and was great at finding fits for his team, finding undervalued and underappreciated players. But I felt like there was a closed-mindedness about those the way the Steelers did business, that they did Steelers things. They found Steelers players, and they weren't really worried about what everybody else was doing. And I think Omar is showing how you can take advantage of knowing what other teams are doing by getting a free 4th-round pick for trading 2 guys that were never going to play at all this year in Kevin Dotson and Kendrick Green.
There's certainly an adeptness to the way that he's looked at things. And I think that's a really good perspective to approach that conversation with, Alan, because you look at Omar Khan, and when people were talking about where he's going, and he's been the numbers cruncher, he's been the guy, he's had time to study those trends. And I'm sure he has some experience, scouting players and knowing that. But that's why they went and got Andy Weidel, because that's what Andy Weidel does. He knows exactly what he's looking for on the market. He knows he's knowing how to judge talents and things like that. And now he can better inform Omar, who's like, hey, I think I see this in this guy, and let's powwow on this. And okay, now let's combine that with how I'm seeing how the trends are working in the different markets of the NFL and what we can pounce on and how other teams are approaching things. I think that's certainly giving the front office some new perspective. That's kind of refreshing to see from the Pittsburgh Steelers, like you said. And again, this is not a knock on Kevin Colbert, who is a Hall of Fame general manager. Like when all said and done, I think he's going to get those type of honors. You win 2 Super Bowls, you bring back the Steelers to their glory. You draft Ben Roethlisberger, Troy Polamalu, and a number of other guys who were top tier talents in the NFL. He deserves a ton of credit. And again, for making a aggressive move, he had to trade up to get Troy Polamalu. He had to trade to get Minkah Fitzpatrick. There's a lot of things over the years. That
2008 Super Bowl team had 9 starters that were drafted on day 3 or not at all. Like that's
impressive.
That's like God tier scouting, right?
Yeah.
Like that's top of the list. Okay. So I'm not taking anything away from Kevin Colbert. I think the different approach, and look, if they can't scout, it won't matter, right? Like it doesn't matter if you're good. The 4th-round pick doesn't make any difference if you blow it, right? You still need to capitalize on the opportunities. I just think it's a good, I think Omar's kind of become a meme almost, like more than he is a person at this point within the Steelers fan base, the con artist. And I just thought it was a good time to kind of talk about how he's different and why we're seeing some of these things that, Smitty, I think you were kind of hinting at this too, is like these are things that Steelers fans, I think, have been looking for. Moves like what we've seen from Omar and why they're happening now.
Yeah, I think they went from things where as fans we would always be like, that's a nice player, that's a pipe dream, to, this is actually realistic now. But I think that adding the context that Chris did, where we don't have a big money quarterback that we're paying all this money to, that's why it is a realistic thing to add this player, is important too, because it's not just because they never wanted to add those types of players, they financially couldn't, where they're in a different place now.
I agree. That's exactly where I'm coming from, is that it's a different circumstance. You get different ammunition as a front office, just to be able to do things, and more flexibility, because, even though they're paying, there's someone still getting paid top dollar, and that's TJ Watt, but that's still not quarterback money that we're talking about there. And so it's just different. And I think that it'll, what'd you say?
You spread it around.
Exactly. You could spread it around a lot easier. So I think that's a major asset. And listen, here's the thing. I am very encouraged by what Kenny Pickett has shown in the preseason and in training camp. I know that there's some people there's Steelers fans that go way over the top and say Super Bowl this, Super Bowl that, right now, right this year. But I do think they have a good chance to win the division this year. Like I'm putting them in that conversation with the Bengals. Like I think that not to say that the Bengals are going to be bad. I think the Steelers are going to be good. And if this is the start of the new window, man, these next few years with Kenny Pickett on a rookie deal and their ability to go be aggressive, that could be really exciting to watch.
I think the Bengals are well overdue to sleepwalk through a regular season. They're still not a team that I would want to see in the playoffs on my schedule, but they're overdue to be just kind of wander to 11 wins and that's it. To not be great week in and week out.
Have an average year.
Go through some of those things where they're breaking in a lot of new people in important places on the defense, and maybe they're going to struggle early because of it. Maybe this will be the year they have a lot of injuries. I don't know. It's just really hard, even if you have great personnel, and the Bengals do, to have great results in the regular season year in and year out over and over again. Like I said, I still wouldn't want to see them in the playoffs, but I think they're, I don't think it's some kind of lock that the Bengals are this 12-13 win team again. And I do think I like the Steelers' chances more and more. I saw yesterday, their odds of winning the division have gone from plus 550 to plus 450. That's a big jump this late in the game, without any kind of, I mean, look, with all due respect to Desmond King, he is not the guy that's making that happen. Like, it's not like they went out and signed some Pro Bowler or made some big trade. Like, this is all based on basically just a really, really, like, do you remember 3 weeks ago when nobody was talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers at all? And now they're like the darlings of the whole media landscape based on 5 offensive possessions with Kenny Pickett. It is incredible what some good quarterback play can do for your perception. That's for sure.
I want to get you guys' take on this. How much of this is also the likability of Kenny Pickett? Because even when Ben Roethlisberger played well, the national media didn't embrace him. And like, I was a person who, like, I was always honest about Ben Roethlisberger. When he stunk, I was like, yo, he stunk in this moment. And there's people locally who just couldn't do that. If Ben would throw 5 interceptions, like, oh, that wasn't his fault. And I'm like, come on. Like, but nationally, when he throw 5 touchdowns, I'd be like, he was on fire today. Like, he was doing his thing. And then the national media would just be like, meh. And I would just wait, I get, bragging on him when he's down. And I get just being honest about that. But like, I remember in 2020 when they beat the Ravens in the first game, they played really well in Baltimore. And then we had that wait because the Ravens had COVID and all that stuff.
We played Wednesday afternoon football.
Right. I remember leading up to that game, like, there was all this discussion about how the Ravens owned the Steelers, and like they played all the highlights from the first game that the Steelers won, and it was all Ravens highlights. And I was like, what? Like, how? Like I don't know. I saw those type of things with the Steelers under Ben Roethlisberger, and it felt like, is this because they don't like Ben because of his past? And listen, I'm not saying people don't have the right to dislike Ben Roethlisberger for the stuff that he was accused of and caught doing, but at the same time, I wonder if part of this is because the Steelers are now clean of that slate, and now you have Kenny Pickett, who's never done anything wrong. He's already married, seems like a really nice guy, signs all the autographs, and doesn't have that aura of Ben Roethlisberger around him.
It's very interesting, especially from a fan's perspective, where like I've talked to fans of other fan bases and stuff. They're like, man, I hate the Steelers. I can't hate on Kenny Pickett the way that I hated on Ben Roethlisberger. Like, I want to have a beer with this guy.
Yeah.
Not only do I not hate him, I like him. So yeah, I think that there could very well be something to that from a fan base to fan base perspective. From a national media thing, maybe it was a little bit of uncomfortableness in the way, like if people talked in too good of a light about Ben Roethlisberger and maybe an unwillingness to cover him in a positive light. I don't know. I mean, that's a great question. I've never really thought about that.
I think the age of social media has made it easier for players that are actually likable to appear likable. I've known Kenny for a long time. I think he is a likable guy. I think he has a winning personality. Not that matters really much at all about football, but like, he's a marketable person. If I was doing business, I would want Kenny Pickett if I was Levin, I'm very happy.
I was about to say,
my recliners, right? Like, but I don't, man, I'm going to get in trouble for this. Ben wasn't likable. He was a jerk to a lot of people, especially early in his career. Like, if you are of my age, okay, I'm going to be 40. Okay. If you are my age and you grew up in Pittsburgh going to bars at the time Ben was a young player in Pittsburgh, 100 people that have I saw Ben Roethlisberger at the club and he was a giant jerk story. Like, at least 100, maybe a couple hundred, like maybe something worse than that. Like, they are all out there. There's a whole generation of people that were like, go Steelers, but that guy, nah. And I think he did. I will give Ben a ton of credit because I think he grew up a lot over his.
I agree.
Like, by the time I started covering the team, 2018, 2019, I never saw any of that. He was a pro. He was a great guy in the locker room and a great guy to get along with. And I think he really did become a different person. But I think that left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths about just being excited about him. It's the whole package. Like, you don't just want to root for the laundry, right? You want to root for the person that's inside of it. And I think, I do think that people like Kenny that make it easy to root for them are going to get more people on their bandwagon, not just fans, but if you're, there's not that much difference between being a fan and being a person that sits on the couch on Monday Morning Football. Like, the same things that would appeal to one of those people are going to appeal to the other. They're just trying to put somebody forward that they think is likable that other people will like too, and then they look good for it. Like that's the same things that fans want to root for.
I feel what's funny is you don't even have to go back to when you were going out. One time I was at Roland's in the Strip District, and like a guy I was with was like, "Hey, ask them about Ben Roethlisberger." And I was like, "What?" They said, "Just do it. It's funny." And I was like, "All right." I was like, "Hey guys, what do you think about Ben Roethlisberger?" And they were like, "Whip that guy!" Like that guy still owes us like $10,000. I'm like, "What?" And they're like, "He just used to come in and just say, put it on my tab, and then when we called him on it, he didn't pay it." And I was like, "Are we for real?" And he's like, "Yeah." And there's like a whole bunch of other businesses that got the same problem. And I was like, "Dang, like, is that a real thing?" And then like I was like, "Yeah, this apparently is." And so, I get it. And again, Ben Roethlisberger is fine. And to be fair, like Ben Roethlisberger was always like fair to me. Whenever I asked him questions, he wasn't a jerk. I did see him be a jerk to other people in the media when it was uncalled for. And I will say that, like, there are people who, and they know who they are, who were just doing their jobs and didn't even say anything in a bad way. And he would just give them a very not cool response. And I would be like, that's a jerk right there. That's the old Ben Roethlisberger creeping into those moments. But I think in by and large, you had that image. But like even again, outside even that image, I don't think the national media got to see that version of Ben Roethlisberger outside of the allegations that went against him and went public. And I think that there was just a sense that, hey, we're not going to touch that guy because there's an image thing there. And so I just, it makes me wonder if the national media being, kind of starting to hop on the Steelers could be the dark horse train a little bit early. Because I thought it would be coming at some point. I didn't think it would come in the preseason. I thought it would be like they'd start off the season 5-1, and then everyone would be like, "Hey, what about them Steelers over there?" But I think it's happening now because they kind of there's no bad guy on this team right now. They're all likable dudes, and even like T.J. Watt, who just eats people for breakfast. Like, what are you gonna say? He's mean about it? Okay, cool, but he's classy. It's like.
Did you see his taco commercial?
No, I missed the taco. What happened with the taco?
Oh, Smitty, do we have the technical capability for you to play a YouTube video here, or is that
we would, yes, if I can find it. What is it?
Right,
what is it?
Hold on, I got it right here. This is well.
Oh Lord.
Well,
is it Old El Paso?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
all right, yeah.
They did the 3 Watts did a Smitty, I'm texting it to you right now, or do you want me to DM it to you? What's better?
I'll be able to play it right off YouTube.
You got it?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, they made a Waterboy parody. Oh yeah.
Oh, what is this? Taco Boy?
Is all this.
Only the finest game day food that you can eat. There's standing stuffed tacos, yummy taco bowls, and enchiladas.
Hot dogs are better!
Hot dog, man. Now that's a high quality taco.
Let's run that back, JJ. I love taco. And now you know that.
With Old El Paso, there's always so many possibilities.
What was that?
All right.
That's a likable guy.
That's a likable guy.
That's a likable guy. That's what that is.
I know what I'm having for dinner.
Wait. A perfect encapsulation of that, of what we're talking about here as far as likable guys. Y'all know the what was it, the Bleacher Report like cartoon thing that they do. It's like something Heights.
Mm-hmm.
I forget what it's called.
I know what you're talking about, but I don't know the name of it. I'll find it.
But like they did an episode when T.J. Watt was a rookie. And it was like because he was coming into the lead and J.J. Watt, Gridiron Heights, yeah. And so like they did an episode, like it was an episode where like T.J. Watt was a rookie and like he was coming in and J.J. Watt was Captain America, and so T.J. Watt's coming in, he's like, wow, I get to be with the Steelers, and then James Harrison comes out of the dark and he's like, yeah, but if you're gonna be with the Steelers, you got to be mean, you got to be nasty. He's like, oh, so like Ben Roethlisberger nasty? He's like, whoa, no, not like that. But like I think that perfectly encapsulates like. They wanted TJ to become a villain. I mean, he's hated by any team, by the Browns, by the Ravens, by the Bengals. Any team that has to go up against him hates playing that guy. But there's no, like, you can't look at him and say, well, he's a terrible person. You're just like, he's a really good player, and I can't stand him.
Yeah. Hey, I'm very excited for the comments of the show, by the way. I cannot wait to see. Yes. Where would we go with it? Oh man. I do want to ask both of you guys, because we've talked a lot about Omar Khan. The guy under him, Andy Weidel, who was briefly mentioned, also mentioned in an article, like pretty much league wide, this guy's going to be a GM at some point. What do we make of the job that he's done so far under Omar? Because Omar even went as far as like acknowledging, okay, this guy's taking the draft board this year. And I don't know that a lot of people like that he's gotten a ton of recognition for doing so.
Can we talk about the draft real quick though? Because I want to bring this up because since everyone has been like fawning over Nick Herbig. Okay, and I think a lot of people have said like, oh yeah, all those idiots that thought Nick Herbig couldn't play outside linebacker look kind of dumb. And look, I'm one of those idiots, so like fine, fair enough. But also like, how about trading down in the 3rd round?
Yeah.
Still getting Darnell Washington and then getting Nick Herbig?
Yeah.
Like man, that's a good job. We gotta mention that.
I mean, what can you say other than you like the product? Now, again, we got to see how these guys develop because, you know, people felt really good about Artie Burns and Sean Davis when they got drafted. They were like, hey, those guys.
I love Sean Davis. I love Sean
I don't know
Davis.
if people felt good about Artie Burns. I did like
Well,
Sean
I mean,
Davis.
people saw him as an
fine
athlete
until he got hurt. I'll stick with that.
But they didn't feel like this year. I'm not saying like they felt great about, but like people were like, hey, you know, maybe he could be a really good starting corner someday. You know, people really liked Sean Davis when he came, and just that 2016 draft with like you just look back at it and like, man, that was some rough pickings. But as far as how this year started, I mean, and again, just off of my personal evaluations, their first 4 picks, Broderick Jones, man, I'm already blanking, Joey Porter Jr., Keanu Benton, and Darnell Washington. And am I missing somebody there? No, yeah, the first 4 picks there.
Yeah,
I had them all ranked in my top 33 in my big board. And like beforehand, when I you can go back and look at Locked On Steelers and look at the episodes where I put the images on the screen. I said, this is how I rank these guys. Man, they'll be lucky to get 2 of them. They got 4 of them. And that's where I'm like, whoa. And maybe it just means that my eyes were aligned in a way that just the stars crossed with the Steelers.
No,
and
that's what Smitty was saying too, though. Like that's it.
I said I've been in lockstep with the Pittsburgh Steelers front office since the draft, like step for step, basically.
It's like it just feels like. Look, I'm not saying that we know what the heck we're talking about. Like I think I do, but it feels like there's just been a lot of things that have gone the way people would hope they would. You know, there's been a smooth flow of like, here are the needs, here are the potential solutions. Oh, I like that one, and that's the one they got. Yeah, I like that one, and that's the one they got. Like it just seems like things keep falling into place. Maybe that's the right word for it, because it some of it's probably luck too. Like let's be honest about that. But man, it's really hard to imagine, or to even with the benefit of hindsight, sit here now and pick out like how could the Steelers have had a better offseason? Like
I mentioned to Tyler the one thing I was like, how much better, and this was before Desmond King, so take that as you will. But we were talking around the 412, and I said to Tyler, how much better would you feel about the Steelers? Literally, they do everything the exact same, except Cam Sutton's back in the fold.
Oh, you know, yeah, that'd be the one. That'd be the one.
That's a big contract, man. I don't know.
It was a big contract.
I don't know. Like, that's a big contract. I understand the trepidation with that contract, even though I love Cam Sutton. That's a big contract. I just don't. I don't know. That's a lot of money. I think.
And I'm not even. And I literally just. Of course, they would have had to have at least given him that. But like, not even looking at the contract, just saying how much better would you feel if just that guy was still on the roster?
I mean, I think Desmond King is like he's a very different player than Cam Sutton, but I think in terms of like ability to replicate a lot of those snaps from last year, I think he's an upgrade. Like if you just look at last year's team, forget like what we've seen so far, but if you just like compare it to last year's team, like he's a big upgrade on Art Millette, and I think he can do some of what Cam Sutton was doing. Now, obviously not the inside-outside thing, but like, I think this is the first time all year I felt good about going into Cincinnati and the plan with covering those 3 receivers.
Yes.
Like I'll say that. Like that's for sure.
I think one thing, and this may not be a this year thing, but it may be, I think this is more of a long-term thing. if they pay Cam Sutton and they draft Joey Porter Jr., cornerback's set for a while, like it's like, all right, well, those are just going to end up being the two starters on the outside for the future. Levi Wallace might stick around, but with bringing in Patrick Peterson and Levi Wallace on the contract that he's on with the Steelers, it leaves the wiggle room of, what, the Steelers, like we're talking about Omar Khan and how aggressive they are now. Imagine like a year or two from now, if they go and name a big name cornerback that's like entering their prime or in their prime, who could be a free agent at the time. And then,
well, he ain't going anywhere, but my favorite in the league's Pat Surtain II. So
okay. Yeah. The Denver Broncos are not letting him go unless they are on a fire sale, which maybe that happens if they just completely crap the bed. But, I love Patrick Surtain. That was a great comparison. So yeah, imagine like a Patrick Surtain is attainable in free agency, and the Steelers go and get them. They wouldn't have been able to do that if they signed Cam Sutton to a long-term deal. So maybe that's the thing there, because that's what honestly, the way this team is constructed, the offensive linemen they brought in, the weapons they have on offense. Kenny Pickett's there on his rookie deal. You got TJ, Minka, Cam, Highsmith locked up for the next few years. And you got different role players here and there. If the cornerback position can turn into another stalwart group, like this becomes one of the best teams in the NFL, as long as everyone keeps progressing in the right ways.
Yeah, Smitty, we had a question about Joey Porter Jr., didn't we? Can we get to that real quick?
Yes, we did. So there's been a lot of talk, obviously, with the slot, with bringing in Desmond King, people thinking, okay, this affects Shannon Sullivan, this affects Elijah Riley. Patrick Peterson as well was expected to see time in the slot. Zach said, really happy, great name, by the way, really happy with the King signing, but I wonder what role Porter has on this defense now, assuming it's Peterson and Wallace on the outside and King on the inside and nickel.
Yeah, I mean, I think there may still be some nickel snaps for him. I think there's dime snaps, but I think that's all there has been. Like, they haven't really shown a willingness to give him much more than that. I think it's there's going to be a learning curve here for Joey Porter Jr. He may be the one guy in this draft class that, like, I'm not sure we exactly like. Keanu Benton may not be more than a good run-stopping nose tackle, but I feel pretty good about him being a run-stopping nose tackle right now. Feel pretty good about what Dick Herbig can do in terms of the pass rush. Feel pretty good about Darnell Washington in the blocking game. And so, like, how much Joey Porter Jr. plays this year, I think, is still very much up in the air. Like, it would not surprise me if it's a little, and it would not surprise me if he ends up starting. Like, I think it just depends on how, he takes to the learning curve of the NFL. Chris, what are your thoughts there?
I really think that Joey Porter Jr. is a talent they're going to get on the field somehow. It's going to take time. And I think what they end up doing is they want certain matchups and certain packages. And like, as the season rolls on, there will be certain packages that he gets rolled out in. Whereas, maybe Patrick Peterson comes off or Levi Wallace comes off, but they're going to want to get him in there. And let's also talk about the realistic possibility. Someone's going to get hurt at some point.
Also, their two starting cornerbacks are not young guys, so they can take some snaps off. Like, there's no question about that. It's not a position where you have to play every rep like offensive line.
Right. I agree. Although the Steelers, they've over the past few years, a lot of their corners do play almost every snap. When they really like them. But I don't think that these corners are in those circumstances per se. Like they like Peterson and Levi Wallace, but I don't think they like them like they did like 2017 Joe Hayden.
No, Levi came off the field a lot last year, and I think that's certainly something that could happen. I definitely think to start he will be the dime DB 100% of the time. Like when they go 6 DBs, Porter will be on the field, and I think we'll see him some in the nickel with Pat Pete inside of him, even with King, because some of these teams, I guess maybe not teams, but some circumstances, right? Like if you go see the Bengals on 1st and 10 in a tie game, you need someone in there that can tackle, because it could be Joe Mixon coming at you, right? But if you get into a situation where it's a team that still plays a tight end, they only put 3 receivers on the field, but they're down by 2 touchdowns and there's 6 minutes left in the game, and they're throwing. Okay, then maybe someone like Desmond King has less value to you than like going with Porter and Peterson. I think the whole concept of this build, the way they've built this defense, is to give them 100 answers for 100 questions instead of one answer for everything, because I think they've realized that doesn't work.
I think that's a fair comparison to how they're looking at it, because I think this team is suited for a lot of different problems. Teams that like to run the ball, teams that like to throw the ball short, long. If certain guys get injured, like when TJ Watt got injured last year, it was over. Like it was like, well, that's we'll see you when he returns. But if TJ Watt gets injured this year, it's still not great. But now you have hurt. It's so much better. You can stomach that. And like last year, they were able to survive without Minkah Fitzpatrick, but this year I think they could survive a little bit better without Minkah Fitzpatrick. And I think that the Steelers are in a position where, especially on defense, they have a lot of ways to crack your code, and that could be the big thing that they're looking for here to be the factor that puts them over the top against some of these better offenses. And again, here's the other thing. Like I always reference this when we talk about the importance of the offense to the defense and playing complementary football. The Steelers defense of 2021 held the Kansas City Chiefs scoreless for a quarter and a half of football in the playoffs in Kansas City with Patrick Mahomes, with, I think Tyreek Hill was still there, with Travis Kelce, with all the weapons that they had. They even gave the Steelers a lead in the second quarter with how they were playing. I think the offense had the ball 4 drives and 3 and out at every single one. If the offense puts up points, gets to at least 2 touchdowns, and at least doesn't 3 and out those other drives, that probably is they probably have the defensive touchdown and 2 scores. They're up maybe 21 or whatever by halftime. And that is a completely different game. And now the Chiefs get in desperate mode, and they don't have as many chances to crack the Steelers' defensive code in that situation. And I think that this defense can potentially be better than the 2021 defense. If this offense truly does bring it this year, Kenny Pickett's putting points up on the board, if the run game's actually moving people and Najee Harris is bowling people over and Jalen Warren are just, if this offense is giving people those problems and this defense can play at that level, they can bang with big boys. They can hang with the Chiefs, not just hang. They might give the Chiefs a problem. I think we saw last year they hung with the Bengals both games. They won the first game. The Bills, as much as this was a preseason run, that was their first team out there, and they were getting smoked. I mean, we can say all we want about, well, it's preseason, it doesn't matter. See you in the regular season. That was Josh Allen and them were trying, and their efforts were futile in those moments.
And the other thing is, none of them, other than the Bengals, are on the schedule.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
There's no Chiefs, there's no Bills, there's no Eagles, there's no game on this schedule that feels like right now we're putting it down as a loss. If you're seeing one of those teams in the playoffs, you're probably already having a real good year.
I agree. Yeah, I think that if you're right, if you see one of those teams, they're not wild card teams this year. I don't think they're division winners. So either you're the wild card team or you've gotten pretty far in the playoffs and you're playing for a really high stakes game this year. I do wonder this, I want to bring this up with you guys just to poke your brains for a little bit. We've heard, the thing that's always been said about the Steelers, for the past few years is like, well, when are they going to win a playoff game? When are they going to win a playoff game? It's been 6 years, whatever. And every year someone always adds like 2 more years onto it prematurely. Like someone said, oh, it's 8 years now. And I'm like, no, it's not. Like, calm your butt down. But we're seeing, the idea of like, man, if he doesn't do it this year, like with this roster's really good. If he doesn't do it, they're in trouble. If we're saying that this year, this roster is finally good enough to win a playoff game, are we acknowledging that the Steelers, shouldn't have been winning playoff games the last few years? Because, I mean, like last year, we went in the last season thinking like, man, if they can figure out a way to win 9 games, that's going to be a miracle, especially after TJ Watt got hurt. And that's what they did. Mm-hmm. And the year before that, 2021, no one expected old man Ben Roethlisberger to drag that team to the playoffs and get a lead on the the Chiefs, in Kansas City. Like that was far from everyone's mind. And you could say maybe 2020 they should have beaten the Browns. I still think, offense just crapping the bed in that game and playing terribly led to that, which is a reason for a lot of their playoff losses in the 2010s. 2017, yes, that's a big letdown. But I'm talking about since 2019, you can maybe throw out 2020, but 2019, 2021, 2022, were those teams like this that we look on paper like that they were stacked to handle the business?
No. maybe 18. You could
Chris,
say
it's
that
actually been a decade now, by the way.
Exactly. We're just getting longer and longer.
Well, my favorite part about all that though is in 2017 they won their division.
Yeah.
And they were in the second round.
Yep.
So if they had been worse, if they had gone 10 and
they play the Bills
10 and 5 instead of 13-3, and they beat somebody in the wild card round in 17 and then still lose to the Jaguars in the second round, would people be happier now?
It's better because they won a playoff
they
game.
won a playoff game? No, it doesn't make any freaking difference.
It's a dumb. Listen, the three of us understand because we are smart.
Chris,
people.
you know what I think about too, though, is we were just talking about how up until 3 weeks ago, this team has been getting no hype. So how all of a sudden do they have the expectation, looking at the roster, to make a deep playoff run?
That's
in a loaded AFC. Look at the AFC. The Steelers could be, and this isn't my prediction or anything like that. They could be better than last year and still finish third or fourth in the division.
Easily.
Very well could happen. I mean, again, we're talking about good teams in the conference and in the division. Like the AFC North may be the best division in football this year. Like talent-wise, team construction wise, quarterback wise, this could be a tough year to be in this division. But being honest, I think the Steelers upgrades might be the best upgrades in the division from last year over to this year. And the Steelers finished third last year, a game back from the Baltimore Ravens. They weren't an easy out for the Bengals, when they played last year. So that's why I think that it's reasonable to say they could be bringing it. They could be a problem. And so, man,
you heard it here first, folks. Steelers in Super Bowl.
That's exactly what we said.
But to your point, Smitty, I do think that there's the part of the different tone is that, I mean, and like Alan, you said at the top of the show, the odds went from 550 to 450 in a month.
Because he signed Desmond King. Yeah.
Because they signed Desmond King. That's why it's so much better. But people are acknowledging that, hey, maybe this team was better than given credit for. And I think that if Kenny Pickett is who I think he is, because I've been saying since he played at Pitt, I'm like, that dude's a dog. And when he's on the field, if he knows his offense and he trusts his guys and he has a rapport with them, I'd be afraid to play that man. And so that's when he was going in the draft. I didn't think there was any way he'd fall to 20. I thought for sure he'd get picked top 10, top 15 at the latest. And when he was sitting there at 20, I'm like, well, that makes sense if the Steelers take him. And then they did. And I'm like, well, wait a second here. This, I didn't expect the new quarterback to come this soon. I thought that with how late they were picking this was going to be a project for a couple years. But man, I think that the Steelers, if he is who I think he is, Kenny Pickett that being, I think this team is out. I think they are looked at as being a rebuild roster. I think they are being looked at as a true threat in the AFC very soon. And then this time next year, everyone's going to be saying, "Oh man, but how are you going to take the Steelers?" But again, they gotta walk the walk. They gotta prove it this season. I did some Dennis Green there and said, they are who they thought he is, who I thought he was. But you can't crown them until they've been crowned. So. Not crowning them as a Super Bowl chance, but crowning them as a real contender. That's what they got to prove this year.
Smitty, we're way over. It's music time. What do you got to wrap us up? Oh, and Chris, we need your thoughts on the music also. Did you get the music in the intro? Should we play it again for him? We're big fans of our music here at Steelers Afternoon Drive. I like Chris Locked On Steelers has a little jazzy kind of like a jazz club beat when kind of thing. We've got a little rock and roll.
I'm not going to play the whole thing because that's saved for 10,000.
No, we're not doing the whole
here. But listen to a little bit of this.
I'm listening. Yeah. It makes me think afternoon I'm driving home and I'm listening to some random station that I have to listen to.
Would you maybe describe it as renegade-y?
A little bit, like Renegade, but I couldn't pay for it on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. So I got the free thing for if Tubi had an audio service, that would be Tubi Renegade.
This has to pass the YouTube checks.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's Renegade. And actually a good ear, Alan, because the beat that I use there for my transitions is actually a beat that's derived from A Night in Tunisia, which is one of the most famous Miles Davis jazz songs of all time. So shout out to my friend Devin, who put that, Devin Swain, he put that together in his days of being Nerd Boy, a local rapper here in Pittsburgh.
Well, it's good. It's good. I like that. I like what we've got. Smitty, get us out of here.
Well, we got to tell the people where they can find both of you. We'll start with Chris since he's the guest. And also, we normally just have you say the social handles, where they can find your work, stuff like that. I also feel like your barber should get a shout out because I feel like you get your hair cut every single day.
Hey, listen. It was Smitty. It was looking rough before this morning, man. This is fresh out the shout out to Mitch. He cuts my hair in Edgewood. Look up Mitch's cuts for that. He is great. Download Style Seats, great app, by the way, if you ever want to find a new barber in the area. But my name is Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. Read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com. Check out the North Shore Drive podcast with the Post-Gazette, as well as the Locked On Steelers podcast with the Locked On Podcast Network. That's Monday through Friday on YouTube and all your audio platforms.
I'm Alan Saunders at @Saunders_PGH, SteelersNow.com, at PGH Steelers Now on Twitter, and at PGH Steelers Now on YouTube, which is where this site lives. Like, subscribe, leave a comment. We want to hear from you, and we still need your freaking cars. Send them.
I hope that Jamie is in the process of restoring.
We need the car. We need the pictures of your Steelers-ified vehicular transportation. I don't care if you got a 10-speed with a Ben Roethlisberger football card rattling in the spokes, okay? Like, we need your Steelers-ified vehicles so that we can talk about them on the Drive podcast. That's the whole thing of what we're doing here. Smitty.
All right, well, this has been another episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive. That's Alan Saunders. That's Chris Carter. Chris, thanks for joining us again. I am Zachary Smith, PGH. That's where you can find me everywhere. Thanks for hopping in and taking another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.